On this day 2 months ago, 19-year-old Sean Paul Velazquez was shot and killed in his girlfriend's bed. I got the privilege of talking to his loved ones, and they want me to share his story. On March 24th at around 12:30 p.m., officers were called to a home in Cold Spring, Texas, and when they arrived, they found Sean lying on the bed in a pool of blood. He'd been shot multiple times and was already deceased. The home belonged to Sean's girlfriend, and when they asked her what happened, she said that her ex-boyfriend, 19-year-old Joshua Escobar, walked into the home and shot Sean. He then fled the scene in a gray car. Joshua was arrested the next day and charged with murder. He was originally being held on a $1 million bond, but the judge recently reduced it to just $75,000. In the weeks leading up to the murder, Sean's girlfriend was reportedly receiving threatening text messages from Joshua, including a threat to kill Sean. Normally when I cover these cases, there's always a ton of information about the bad details or the murder itself, but what I found when researching this case wasn't about that. Instead, I learned how good of a person Sean was and the overwhelming amount of love his friends and families have for him. There's even a whole online tribute wall dedicated just to him. I learned that he had so much charisma and was a true leader. Every post that I read about him said that you could be having the worst day of your life, and if Sean was around, you'd forget it in an instant. He had a big future ahead of him, and it was all cut short over a jealous ex. Since today marks 2 months without Sean, his family will be holding a vigil for him at the San Jacinto Courthouse tonight at 6 p.m. If you're in the area and it's possible, please stop by and show Sean and his family your support.
It's not just David that's under suspicion anymore. People are starting to question David's friends. Asia Collins and David were extremely close friends, maybe even a little too close. Asia claimed that she had no idea that David and Celeste were dating, and she even took it a step further by claiming that she had never seen Celeste before, which are both obvious lies. When Celeste first went missing and everyone was posting about it, Asia swiped up on someone's story saying that Celeste was David's girlfriend, which shows us that she knew that David and Celeste were dating. Asia is also not some innocent saint either. Just like David, Asia was acting like a pedo as well.
But we gotta be low-key about it.
I'm just hoping, like, we're at an arcade. I hope I don't get a minor's number, bro. Like, no.
You gotta ask the age first.
No, you never ask the age.
Gamble, we gotta gamble.
Find out later, after you hook up with them.
After,
yeah.
Just gotta gamble your life.
No, it's not gambling nothing, you know? If they snitch, you know, you just...
Whoa, yes it is.
I mean, birds of a feather flock together, so this is not surprising behavior from Asia. Also, did you see at the end of the video, Asia made a gesture with her hand, basically saying you get rid of the minor if they snitch. There is also a video where you hear David and his friend Neo in the background casually talking about how they murdered Celeste.
It's kind of giving Harley Quinn.
Okay.
Aw, cute. I like it!
I honestly believe that David and Asia were way more than friends, and that is why Celeste was so jealous. I also have a video where David and Asia seem way too comfortable making inappropriate jokes with each other. Now, let me know what you guys think of it, because to me, it's giving a lot more than just friends.
What is this? You broke out the United throat. Sorry. Asia got United throat, son.
What? USA
throat.
She was so obsessed with true crime that she unalived someone just out of curiosity. Young Yu Young was living in South Korea, and she was such a big true crime fan that she would devote most of her time to reading and watching true crime. She became so obsessed with it that she started researching what would be the best way to unalive someone. In order for Young to do this, she needs a victim, so that is when she responds to an ad for a tutor. Young was using an app for tutoring, and this is when she came across a female English tutor, and she told the tutor that she was a mother and she wanted her daughter to learn English. Obviously, Young made this story up, but she told the tutor that her daughter would meet with her at her home in 2 days. Young's plan was to pretend to be that supposed daughter. She bought a school uniform online, put it on, and headed over to that tutor's home. Once she arrived, the tutor let her into the home, and once Young was inside, she attacked her with a knife. Once she had unalived her, she went to a nearby supermarket to buy bleach and bin liners to clean up the blood. She then went back to the tutor's home and cut up her body so that it would be easier to move. Young put the tutor's dismembered body into a suitcase and then took off her bloody clothes and put on the tutor's clothes. Young had a plan to cover up the murder by making it seem as if the tutor had just vanished, so she took her cell phone, her pocketbook, and her ID. Young then called a cab to drive her to a park area where she could dispose of the remains, but that cab driver called police because he found her very suspicious. Once police arrived to that park area, they found trash bags filled with bloody clothing and part of the victim's remains. The police then made their way back to the victim's home, and that's when they found the remaining of the victim's severed body. Young was arrested after being seen on CCTV footage walking down an empty street with a suitcase. She tried to persuade authorities that it was just a misunderstanding and she just got into a verbal argument with the victim when things went wrong, and then changed her story again that there was a third party involved and they were the ones who did it and she was just the one that disposed of the body. Young's relatives ended up persuading her to just tell authorities the truth, so she told them that she was just so intrigued with true crime that she wanted to give it a try. When police were investigating Young's phone, they found that she was researching for 3 months how to unalive someone and to hide their body. Young was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison.
If I didn't know this was a true crime case, I would think it was a disturbing horror film. It was the morning of the 7th of October 2022 in Excelsior Springs, Missouri. Suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, a random woman was running around the neighborhood, banging on people's doors, screaming for help. Witnesses described her as literally looking like she came straight from a horror film. She was a shocking sight, covered in injuries and wearing a bin bag. Disturbingly, she was also gasping for breath because she had this locked metal collar round her neck. She cried out that she had been held captive for weeks and was SA'd and tortured. Well, thankfully, a nurse opened the door to her and let her inside and called for help. At this point, the woman, who was clearly still absolutely terrified, panicked and warned her captor would kill her and claimed that he'd killed 2 other women. Police raced over to this house to question the woman and find out what on earth was going on. Now, she explained that a man called Timothy had captured her the month before. He'd pulled up next to her in a vehicle and pulled a gun out on her. He confiscated her phone and immediately SA'd her right there in the vehicle. He then forced her to take substances and then took her to his house where he kept her in the basement. Now, he referred to this as his dungeon and he'd been repeatedly SAing her. Now, maybe the most shocking part of this whole thing for me is that Timothy actually had a young son who lived at the house where he was doing all of this to helpless victims. Remember, she claimed there was 2 murder victims, so it makes me feel physically sick thinking about what that little boy potentially could have been exposed to. The brave woman had actually used this to her advantage, the fact that there was a child there, because Timothy actually needed to go and do the school run. So she waited for him to go one morning and bravely made her escape. She gave police a description of the house and the man and showed them where he lived. They made their way over there and found that this man was Timothy Hazlitt Jr. Police entered this property to find exactly how the victim had described. He did, in fact, have that dungeon, that basement, and that wasn't all she was right about. The dungeon was full of torture tools, locks, and cameras. She told them how she had to be AR'd in order to get food. The woman told police how Timothy had used a gas mask on her and had warned that that's how he'd killed a previous victim. She states that Timothy had said she didn't last 3 minutes. He'd also allegedly told the woman that he'd electrocuted another victim to death and warned her that he would do the same to her. Now, Timothy was arrested on his way back from that school run and originally charged pretty quickly with first-degree R, kidnapping, assault, and endangering a child. However, things would get even darker. They thoroughly searched the property and found that he had some disturbing images stored on his computers. Some were of Timothy himself dressed in women's lingerie, and some were images of local missing woman Janie Crosdale. Janie was a lovely woman. She was very popular and very friendly. Her family said she didn't have a judgmental bone in her body. She really was a friend to everyone. Now, in 2023, after the brave survivor escaped, skeletal remains of Janie were found discovered in a barrel in a river. The barrel was apparently an exact match of some of the barrels found in Timothy's basement. Officers obviously added a first-degree murder charge to his record. Investigators believe that Janie was killed between June 2022 and October 2022. Now, Timothy had allegedly made some really disgusting racist remarks on social media, and the 2 women that we know that he captured were black women. So in my opinion, this is not also an S-motivated attack, this is also hate crimes. It's not clear whether another 3rd victim has been found, but he will go on trial in December 2025.
This baby had over 50 injuries, including a broken spine, yet no one cared enough to step in. Peter Connolly was a 17-month-old baby born in Tottenham, London. Initially, his upbringing was like any other child's. He was cheerful, full of smiles, and seemed relatively safe in his environment until it slowly turned into a nightmare. When his mother, Tracy Connolly, brought her boyfriend, Stephen Barker, into the home, everything changed. Later, Jason Owen also became part of the household, and behind closed doors, Peter's world became something no child should ever experience. Over 8 months, Peter suffered more than 50 injuries. I'm talking about broken ribs, cigarette burns, and he even had torn tissue in his mouth. He had a fractured spine so severe that it was compared to the force of a high-speed car crash. And a missing tooth was later discovered inside his body. And you want to know the most disturbing part? Peter wasn't hidden from the authorities. In fact, he was seen by professionals over 60 times. Social workers, doctors, health visitors, people who were supposed to notice when something was wrong. He was even placed on the child protection register, but somehow the signs kept being ignored. Injuries were explained away. In fact, in one visit, evidence of abuse was reportedly concealed by using chocolate to hide the bruising. And just one day before his death, a pediatrician examined him and failed to identify a broken spine. On August 3rd, 2007, Peter died at just 17 months old. 3 people were later convicted of causing and allowing his death. Tracy Connolly pleaded guilty and was sentenced to an indefinite time in prison. Stephen Barker, who was identified as the primary abuser, was sentenced to 12 years plus life for separate offenses. Jason Owen was also found guilty, but was later released after serving part of his sentence. But the story didn't just end in court. It spilled into the entire UK child protection system. The outrage was immediate, public trust collapsed, and the review that followed exposed something devastating. The warning signs weren't missing, they were just ignored. And because of their blatant negligence, an innocent child is now gone. What do you guys think about this case? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.
This conspiracy theory has been circulating online for years, but is there any actual validity to it? Smiley face killers is a conspiracy theory that there is a group of killers out there that have been targeting privileged, successful, popular, college-aged men since the 90s. These potential victims are last seen leaving either parties or bars, and then later found either in or near bodies of water where a smiley face is spray painted nearby. And if this conspiracy theory is true, that would mean that this group is responsible for the unaliving of at least 45 men. These men's cause of death is usually ruled as accidental drowning involving alcohol, even though many of them did not have an excessively high blood alcohol level. And the strange details in these cases does not end there. Many of these men are not found for weeks or months after they vanished. And other details and timelines in these cases does not make any sense with the official ruling of their unaliving. Like with Chris Jenkins, whose body was found in a river 4 months after he was last seen leaving a bar on Halloween night. Investigators concluded that he had fallen in the river and drowned the night that he went missing and closed the case, despite the fact that the river that he was found in had actually been frozen over when Chris went missing, and a smiley face was found painted nearby. And there are so many other strange cases linked to this conspiracy theory with just equally as unexplained details, so if you'd want to see me talk about those in a second video, just let me know in the comments. And because many of these men had these super strange details, like either the lake was frozen over or they were found in a creek that had already been thoroughly searched. Or in some cases, when these men had been missing for months and then when their body was found, it looked like they had only been unalived for like 24 hours. People that believe this conspiracy theory believe that these men are actually being held at a separate location for either weeks or months before being unalived and then being dumped in these bodies of water.
Because of the similar profile of these men, it is believed that the group who is responsible is either a group of jealous men or possibly a group of women. Other than 2 retired NYPD detectives, this theory is not believed by law enforcement and is not currently being investigated. I've known about this theory for years, and I definitely have always thought that it was something at least looking into. Many of these cases have such strange details that I think at least should have been looked into before being closed. Let me know in the comments if this is a theory that you would believe and if you'd be interested in me covering some more of the cases that people believed are linked to the smiley face killers.
On Friday, authorities in Griffin, Georgia found a 10-year-old child who weighed 36 pounds walking through a neighborhood looking for food. His parents, Tyler and Krista Shinley, were just arrested and have been accused of keeping him confined in his bedroom over the past 3 years and basically starving him to death. This is what we know so far. Neighbors spotted the boy walking down Westminster Circle without shoes, looking incredibly frail, so they took him in and called the police. When authorities arrived, the boy told him that he was hungry and walking to a nearby Kroger to buy food. He told them, quote, "Please don't make me go back home," end quote. The boy was described by police as thin, with discolored skin and visible injuries. He was then taken to a nearby hospital to be treated for severe malnutrition and a low heart rate. Again, he weighed only 36 pounds, which is equivalent to a 4-year-old. After the boy was found, his dad Tyler turned himself into authorities, and his mom Krista was arrested shortly after. During the investigation, it was revealed that they kept their son confined in his cell-like bedroom for extended periods of time and intentionally withheld food from him. Along with that, they also withheld other basic necessities from him, such as light, hot water, toilet paper, human interaction, and a view of the outside world. Court documents showed that the boy also suffered from dental injuries and disfiguration as a result from the abuse. 4 other kids were also found in the home, but according to authorities, there is no indication that they have been physically abused. But they did witness what their parents did to their brother. The Georgia Police Department has confirmed that all of the kids were being homeschooled. The Shinleys were described by neighbors as very private people, and on the outside and on social media, you would have never guessed what was going on behind closed doors. Tyler and Krista are being held in the Spalding County Jail and were just denied bond. They face charges such as false imprisonment, cruelty to children, and attempted murder, as well as many others. The child is reportedly now in stable condition, and the rest of his siblings have been placed in state custody.
She was buried alive in concrete after disappearing from her apartment complex. Nevaeh Buchanan was a 5-year-old bright little girl from Monroe, Michigan, who loved riding her scooter around the apartment complex like she owned the world. She had just graduated preschool and was so excited for kindergarten. She was always laughing, she was always moving, and was the kind of kid who felt fully alive in her little everyday world. In May of 2009, she was last seen outside the Charlotte Arms apartments, playing like it was just another normal evening. She told her mother she was going to be nearby, but she never came back. At first, it didn't feel like she could have gone far. Neighbors started looking, her family called out her name, and suddenly everything escalated into panic. An Amber Alert went out across Michigan, and what started as a simple search turned into hundreds of people combing the area. I mean, they had police, volunteers, helicopters, all of them searching for a little girl who just vanished. They checked the woods, quarries, riverbanks, anywhere she could have wandered, but there was nothing, only silence. And that silence lasted 11 days. Then on June 4th, everything shifted. 2 fishermen near the River Raisin came across something they weren't supposed to find. A shallow grave covered with concrete, and inside of it was Nevaeh's remains, about 12 miles away from her home. And what investigators later reveal is what makes this case so hard to sit with. They believe she may have been buried alive. I can't even imagine how terrified that baby was being trapped underground. And it just gets worse when you remember she was just 5 years old. Even with thousands of tips and an intense investigation, no one was ever charged. People were questioned, a few names surfaced early on, but nothing ever led to an arrest. The case remains open in Monroe County to this day. What do you guys think about this case? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.
Imagine going to your front yard and finding your mom's skull. 23-year-old Bonnie Heim was a young wife and mother from Jacksonville, Florida. Her and her husband Michael worked at a construction supply business that his family owned, and he was a manager and she handled the books for them. Their marriage was not going well at all, as Michael would physically and verbally abuse Bonnie on the job multiple times a day. It got to the point that Bonnie wanted to get a divorce, so she set up a separate bank account. Bonnie was trying to keep this a secret from Michael, and she would send her bank records to the computer at work, but Michael ended up finding out and he was furious. She ended up putting a deposit for a new apartment, putting her son into a new daycare, and giving cash to her neighbor to keep safe for her. On January 6 of 1993, Bonnie got off of work around 7:30 p.m. and had plans to go to Michael's aunt's house to get some stuff ready for a friend's upcoming baby shower. Around 8:30 p.m., Bonnie called Michael's aunt that she wasn't going to be going anymore because her and Michael got into a really big fight and she would just talk to her in the morning. But neither Bonnie or Michael showed up to work the next morning. The next day, Bonnie's handbag was found 5 miles away in a motel's trash can near the Jacksonville airport. From the beginning, Michael denied any involvement in Bonnie's disappearance. He claimed that on January 6, when they had their fight, she drove away and he never saw her again. Apparently, Michael had told his mom to keep an eye on their son while he went to go search for Bonnie, and about 45 minutes later, he came back home and waited until the following day to call in sick to work and didn't call the police. The investigating officer on this case was not too convinced with Michael's story, so he went to the Jacksonville airport, which was pretty close to the motel, and in that parking lot, he found Bonnie's car. When he was investigating Bonnie's car, he noticed that the driver's seat was pushed back, which wasn't usual for Bonnie since she was on the shorter side, and he noticed some footprints on the floorboard, and those matched up to Michael. Weirdly enough, Bonnie's father didn't find it strange that they had found Michael's shoe print inside of Bonnie's car, and when investigators had talked to Bonnie's and Michael's 3-year-old son, he told them that he had saw his father do something to his mother, and Bonnie's father didn't believe him. Bonnie had not been heard from since 1999, so she was presumed dead, and Michael ended up remarrying and getting her life insurance policy. Bonnie and Michael's son Aaron, who was adopted, insisted that he wasn't lying. He stated that his father had shot his mom and then took him to a nearby bridge to throw away the gun. Because Aaron had witnessed this at such a young age, he became clinically depressed and got PTSD. He even successfully sued Michael for $26 million. In addition to that, he got the family home. In 2014, Aaron owned his own landscaping business and decided he wanted to renovate his childhood home. As he was doing some yard work, he discovered a hard object underneath a stone. He lifted it up and put it in his palms, and that's when he noticed a tooth, an eye socket, and a jaw. That's when he realized that he had just found his mother's skull. Aaron had immediately alerted authorities, and they took it in for testing, and that is when they discovered that it did belong to his mother, Bonnie. On August 24th of 2015, Michael was taken into custody and charged with second-degree murder. When Michael was in court, he claimed that he was innocent, and the jury had deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding him guilty and giving him a life sentence on the day before what would have been Bonnie's 50th birthday.
She was beaten and left for dead in Florida, but how did her attacker manage to get her out of the hotel in full view of all the security cameras and not be seen? It was like he turned her invisible. The detectives even said he must have been a magician. This is how investigators finally solved the mystery of the vanishing blonde. It was a winter's morning in 2005 near the Everglades in Florida. A local man had been driving past a cul-de-sac when he spotted something horrific. He suddenly, out of the blue, saw a body. He immediately pulled over to find a nude woman lying face down in the weeds. She had long blonde curls covering her face, but he was pretty sure she was dead. He called an ambulance straight away, but by some miracle she was still clinging on to life. He had no idea that the 21 Ukrainian woman had been severely beaten and left for dead shortly before. Her name was Inna Budnystaka. It was a real miracle he'd managed to get her to the hospital. She had severe head trauma and a broken eye socket. She regained consciousness in hospital and basically could remember very little of what had happened to her. She only really remembered being in her room and suddenly being attacked. She'd been drugged and a pillow pushed into her face. Now, luckily, the hotel she'd been staying in had a huge amount of CCTV. Investigators were pretty confident that they would be able to look on the cameras and find out who was responsible. But this was so much more mysterious than that. The CCTV did show the woman going up to her room, but but never leaving. So how did she end up face down in the weeds like 8 miles away from the hotel? Investigators initially started thinking of other options. Maybe she left via the balcony. But this woman was staying on the 4th floor. Unless she was beaten in her room and then maybe winched down by her attackers, it seemed very unlikely. And I don't know of any S-offender cases where somebody has been attacked and they've preempted needing a crane and rope and gently craned them down from a hotel. Also, what were the chances that that wouldn't have been picked up by security cameras on the ground floor? And nobody witnessed anything either. Hotel staff were interviewed and absolutely nobody had seen this woman leaving the building. The hotel was really high security. It was fenced, the back gates were locked and monitored. There was 2 security guards on each exit at all times. The electronic key cards did show that the woman had entered her room after 3 a.m. and she'd been found about 3 hours later. One thing that was spotted on CCTV was that a man entered the lift just behind her when she entered her room. They decided to try and find this man on CCTV leaving, and after hours of combing through the footage, they did manage to do just that. Less than 2 hours later, he was seen leaving the hotel with a suitcase. Now that's pretty common for a hotel guest. However, he then entered the hotel again about an hour later, so it was clear he wasn't actually checking out at this point. Police started wondering if the victim was curled up in that bag. But this guy just seemed so calm and casual and normal. He certainly didn't seem like somebody who just potentially killed somebody and was going to dump a body. The officers knew that this meant either he hadn't done it, he wasn't the person they were looking for, or, more chillingly, he'd done it before. They actually ended up having to examine a t-shirt he was wearing on the footage to track down his identity. He was Michael Lee Jones. He'd left Florida and was working in Maryland. Now, after a DNA swab confirmed he was the attacker, he was charged with R-ing, kidnap and beating. He ended up taking a plea deal. He'd plead guilty to SA, having the other charges dropped. However, armed with that DNA sample, they were able to find out something even worse. He was not only to blame for Inna's attack, he'd done this 3 times before. The DNA helped them convict him of the 3 attacks in the years prior, and now thankfully he's serving a life sentence.
Imagine you're in a car with people you love and trust, never once thinking that they would cause you any harm, when all of a sudden the driver floors the gas pedal, flying through a residential street going almost 100 miles per hour. And before anyone can react, the car slams straight into a brick building so hard that the car quite literally splits in 2. And just like that, 2 people are gone. That's what happened to Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan. And the person who was driving the car is 17-year-old Mackenzie Sherilla. Now, at first, you might hear about this case and think, okay, clearly this was a terrible, terrible accident. She was clearly not in control. Maybe she blacked out or something. But the more you look into it and the deeper you go, the harder it is to realize that this is not something that came out of nowhere. Mackenzie and Dominic had actually been in a relationship for a very long time now, but throughout the years, people started saying that their relationship became very toxic. It was no longer about young love and more like intense attachment. There are countless stories of her being physical with him, being very controlling, not wanting him to act a certain way. And there's one moment, weeks before the crash, that really stands out. Her and Dom were in the car together that day, and Mackenzie was driving, but something happened that turned into an argument, and for some reason, it got so heated that Dom started feeling really unsafe, and he actually called his mom to come and pick him up in the middle of the highway. And while he's on the phone with his mom, she can hear Mackenzie in the background yelling, "I'm going to wreck this car right now." Now, at that time, she didn't do anything. Things calmed down, Dom got picked up, the day ended perfectly fine. But that specific moment didn't just disappear, because 2 weeks later, they are all back into that same car again. It's July 31st, 2022, at around 4 or 5-ish in the morning, and after getting ready to leave a friend's house, Dominic hops in the passenger seat of Mackenzie's car, Mackenzie gets in the driver's seat, and their friend Davion gets in the back seat. Now, somewhere during that drive home, something changes. We don't know if one of them said something, maybe they started arguing again, maybe Dom tried to end the relationship for real this time, we don't know. But for whatever reason, Mackenzie started speeding the car up faster and faster and faster. And I don't mean going a little over the speed limit, I mean she is going almost 100 miles per hour on a residential road. And within a matter of literal seconds, seconds, the car flashes down the street, and all you hear are the terrifying sounds of the car smashing straight into a brick building that was right in front of them. The crash was so violent that the car physically split in two, and when officers arrived to the scene, they called it the worst crash they have ever laid their eyes on. Unfortunately, when they looked inside the car, Dominic and Davion did not survive the impact. It was a catastrophic mess. But to their surprise, Mackenzie was still breathing. And so all the policemen locked in, and they said if there's any good that can come out of this crash, it is to save this girl right here. And that's exactly what they did. They rushed her to the hospital. They performed multiple surgeries on her to save her life. And after doing that, now it was time for police to start asking questions and figuring out how the hell did such a bad car crash happen. Mackenzie started saying that she didn't remember anything that happened, that she just blacked out and that was it. So they brought in a neurologist to maybe figure out, okay, why? But all they said was that she probably just had a medical episode. It's possible that she lost consciousness and her body shut down in that exact moment. But here's why it gets difficult to believe that, because the car itself tells an entirely different story. Every car has something called a black box. It's basically like an event data recorder that tracks every move the car makes. And the data from the car that night showed that the gas pedal was pushed down the entire time. There wasn't a second where Mackenzie lifted her foot off of it. There was no attempt to slow down or stop the car, which if you try and pair that with the idea that she passed out, it doesn't make any sense. A limp passed out person wouldn't have the strength to be able to floor a gas pedal to over 100 miles per hour. And when you also put that next to what happened weeks before when she told Dom that she was going to crash the car during an argument, it starts to feel like less of a coincidence. Then there's how she acted after the crash. Mackenzie stayed in a hospital while recovering for some time, and about 3 months later, apparently her parents allowed her to go to a concert with her friends, and she was posting it all over social media, even making a TikTok where she tells people to search her name up. And people saw that and they started thinking, how do you go from something as tragic as this to acting so normal? Like, I know everyone handles trauma very differently. There is no perfect way to grieve, but when you have a mountain of evidence that points only one way, it makes people question the things you do a whole lot more. Eventually, investigators felt very strongly about their case and they made a decision. They arrested Mackenzie and charged her for the murders of Dominic and Davion. Now, in court, the focus wasn't really too much on what happened, but why. Was it truly unintentional? Her lawyer stated that she doesn't remember anything that happened, that something went physically wrong, and that she lost complete control, and why would she harm herself too if her goal was to kill Dom? But the prosecution pointed to the level of speed and the lack of braking that she did, the erratic steering, going right and then left and right again, smashing into the wall almost as if she was purposely trying to hit Dom's side even more, the gear switching from drive to neutral and then back again, and also her toxic relationship with Dom. And in the end, the judge agreed with the prosecutors, and Mackenzie Sharilla was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. But even now, to this day, people are still arguing about this case because there is just one question that never fully goes away. What actually happened in those last few seconds? Was it truly a medical emergency, or was it something that she did purposefully out of anger? We'll never hear Dominic's side. We'll never hear Davion's side. And the only person who could explain anything says that she doesn't remember. But if you were to take just a step back and look at this entire case as a whole,
this is one of those cases where the person seems to have literally vanished out of thin air. Brian Schaefer was a 27-year-old med student who seemingly had it all. He was handsome, he had a lot of friends, he was talented, he was smart. On Friday, March 31st of 2006, Brian had just taken his final exams before spring break started. Brian's mother had just passed away 3 weeks earlier, which was obviously very hard on Brian, but he was still trying to be in good spirits. He was really excited about spring break because Brian and his girlfriend Alexis had a spring break trip planned that following Monday to visit Miami, and this was supposedly where Brian would be proposing to his girlfriend Alexis. So to celebrate spring break starting that Friday, Brian and his friend Clint had plans to go out bar hopping in their town of Columbus, Ohio. They started their drinking at a bar called the Ugly Tuna Saloona. They had at least 3 shots there, but it could have been more before continuing on to go to other nearby bars. They had more shots at every bar they went to, and then at another bar they met up with one of Clint's friends, Meredith, and then the 3 of them went back to the Ugly Tuna to finish out their night. Three of them, Brian, Clint, and Meredith, are seen from the bar's security footage entering the bar. And then around 40 minutes later at 1:55 a.m., Brian is seen talking to two girls right outside of the bar and then seen on security footage entering back into the Ugly Tuna. And the security footage that saw Brian entering the bar again is the last time Brian Shaver has ever been seen again. He is not seen leaving the bar by either eyewitnesses or the bar security footage, and he's not seen on security cameras of any other nearby establishments. A thorough investigation was done, but they brought forth no clues on where Brian Shaver could be. Since the investigators had nothing else to work with, they actually asked Clint, Brian's friend that he was out drinking with, to perform a polygraph test, and Clint refused the polygraph test and actually lawyered up immediately after. After Brian's disappearance, his girlfriend Alexis would call him every single night before she went to bed, and these calls would always go to voicemail. Until one night in September, when the call actually rang 3 times before going to voicemail. Cell phone tower pinged Brian's phone at this time 14 miles northwest of Columbus, Ohio, but the phone company says that this was a glitch and not relevant to the case. And to this day, Brian's phone has never pinged again and has never been recovered. Since there's no evidence in this case, it leaves a lot of theories to be possible and discussed, so I'm going to go over the main ones with you, and I'm really interested to see which ones you believe the most. There's a theory that Brian was actually struggling a lot more than anyone else was aware of, especially because of his mother's recent passing. So it's possible that he actually took his own life or left to start a new one. The other main theory was that Brian was actually the victim of foul play. Apparently, Brian and Clint had some kind of drunken altercation that night at the bar before Brian disappeared. So that and the fact that he immediately lawyered up and refused to take the polygraph test is very suspicious to me and a lot of other people. There's also a huge theory online that Brian was actually the victim of the smiley face killers. This is actually an online conspiracy theory that there's either one serial killer or a group of serial killers that target privileged, college-aged men after a night of drinking. I actually scripted a whole video to cover the smiley face killers, but I never actually recorded it. So if you guys want more information on that theory, please let me know because I already have the video all scripted, I just need to record it. The last main theory I want to get your opinion on is the theory that maybe Brian actually never left the bar that night. Since he was never seen actually leaving the bar on security cam footage and was never seen walking the streets of Columbus, Ohio and other security footages, could it be possible that something actually happened to Brian Shaver that night and then his body was removed maybe the following day when they wouldn't have checked the security cameras? I think that theory is particularly interesting and could be true, especially since he's never actually seen leaving the Ugly Tuna. But seriously, this case is so strange because literally anything could have happened. Clint is particularly suspicious to me, but since there's actually no proof that Brian actually ever left the Ugly Tuna, it's really hard for me to make up my own mind. So please keep discussing this case with me in the comments. I've actually made up my own mind on a lot of the cases I've covered from comments that people have left for me.
Okay, before we get into today's case, I just want to say I see all of your messages about Lindsay Clancy. I'm on it. You guys know, or I hope that you know, I'm quality over quantity, so I just want to take my time with it. I want to make sure that one, everything that I'm putting out, especially about this case because it does feel really controversial, I want to make sure that all the information is one, correct, and two, well formatted to put it out to you guys in a way that makes sense. Because at the end of the day, the reason why I talk about these things is to spread awareness and educate people. So I'm checking my sources, I'm doing my things, but I'm working on it. I just don't want to rush it is my point, but I did want to let you guys know that I'm working on it. Now, as far as today's case, the best way to describe this is by saying that it's a deeply unsettling story, and that's the simplest way that I could put it. This is not an ad, by the way, but I just saw that a new true crime Netflix documentary is coming out later this month, I think. It's called Death of the Pastor's Wife. It's about Micah Miller and what happened to her, and it's a crazy case, so let's talk about it. On April 27th of 2024 at 4:23 p.m., police received a 911 call. The caller was a man that was out fishing, and he was calling to report that there was a deceased human body floating in the water. This was in Lumber River State Park in North Carolina. Come to find out, a second witness was at the park about an hour or so before that 911 call, and he had also heard something very suspicious because he had heard what he described to sound like a really faint cry. He heard a cry for about 2 to 3 minutes and then a loud bang. That prompted him to get really worried really quickly, and after hearing that, he started trying to make his way towards the area in which he thought he heard the crying coming from. He didn't know what happened, but he knew that it couldn't be good, and shortly after that, the fisher then found the body in the water. That body was that
of 30-year-old Micah Miller. And eventually, authorities would also recover a weapon in the water as well as Micah's car that was found in the parking lot. Inside of her car was a receipt showing that the weapon had been purchased that same day, only hours before. When she was found, it looked like to authorities that Micah Miller chose her own fate, but as soon as her friends and family members heard the news, every single person she was close to was looking at one person, and that was Micah's husband of 7 years, Pastor John Paul. The very next day, April 28th, Micah's husband announces Micah's death to their church. He was a pastor at Solid Rock Church in South Carolina, and everyone that attended that church knew John Paul because he was the pastor, but everyone at that church also knew Micah very well because she was so involved in the church. She was always willing to help, kind and genuine to every single person that walked through those doors, and she was always the first to welcome new members in with open arms. So John Paul gets up on stage and he says that he has an announcement. He tells the crowd that he would like for them all to listen carefully and to please not discuss what he is about to say inside of the church. He says, quote, "I got a call late last night. My wife passed away. It was self-induced and it was up in North Carolina." He mentions her funeral, asks for prayer for both him and their children, and continues on to say, "You all knew that she was not well mentally, and then she needed her medicine that was hard to get to." That announcement, weird. Felt weird to a lot of people. Weird way to announce your wife's death, especially the day after. So weird in itself, but even weirder when details of what their marriage was really like started unraveling. And although her cause of death was ruled as a self-inflicted wound, not only Micah's family, friends, and loved ones, but also people from the church came together and spoke out about their beliefs, which were that Micah did not choose her own fate. And they suspected that the person who did was none other than her husband, Pastor John Paul. Back in October of 2023, so months before her death, Micah had told John Paul that she wanted to separate. She wanted a divorce because she claimed that John Paul wasn't only unfaithful, but he treated her terribly, often putting her in positions in which she felt scared of her own husband and forced to stay in that marriage out of fear. This behavior of John Paul being manipulative, possessive, and controlling is also backed up by a paper trail. A trail of previous police reports that were filed, as well as supported by people who knew Micah, who Micah confided in and spoke to about her relationship. One of those people that Micah trusted with a lot of this information was her sister. So to give you an idea of John Paul's behavior, when Micah filed for divorce, she went to her sister's house to get away from him. He did not like that, and he called and texted both Micah and her sister repeatedly, aggressively, basically saying that either Micah comes back home tonight or else. Micah's sister's priority in that situation, like any siblings would probably be, was to protect Micah and to make her feel safe and comfortable. Because of that, she wasn't having anything that John Paul was saying, and she made it very clear to him that he was not welcomed at her house. John Paul then texted her and said, quote, "I will be at your house at 12:55. I am armed and ready, and I will keep you up all night. I'm gonna get her back." Micah's sister called to report this to police, but the case was dismissed, and Micah did eventually return back home. And that's only one example, because between that point and the day that her body was found, there were a lot of concerning instances. On February 8th, Micah Miller was involuntarily hospitalized for 48 hours. She was hospitalized because JP, John Paul, we're going to be referring to him as JP from now on, but JP claimed that she had not been taking her medication and she needed help. She had been struggling with her mental health and she had been seeking medical help because of it, because she had intentions to get better. But the choice to be checked into the hospital, that was not hers, it was JP's. While in the hospital, JP took Micah's keys and purse, stole her car, and moved out all of her possessions out of the home that they shared. During this time and following Micah's release, there was, unsurprisingly, a lot of tension between Micah's family and JP. Because Micah's family felt like JP was exaggerating Micah's mental health, claiming that she was in a horrible headspace only to be able to then use that to his advantage to manipulate her into staying with him when all she really wanted was to leave him. In fact, she made the decision to leave him time and time again, but she would always end up right back with him. That was until days before her death, when she had made the final decision that enough was enough and that she wanted out of that marriage for good. JP's side of the story, of course, was him painting himself out to be a good guy. His reasoning for his behavior was that he was just concerned for Micah's well-being, saying that all he wanted to do was help. But every once in a while, his true colors would show. Obviously, one of his many issues was needing to stay in control, and when he felt that control slipping away, he lost control over his own behavior. Because if something went wrong, and because he claimed to have power of attorney over Micah, if her family members did or said something that he didn't like, he would tell her family that if they continued acting in that way, he would make sure that they would never see Micah again. We also later find out from her sister that prior to Micah being hospitalized, she had expressed the horrible mistreatment against her by her own husband to the people closest to her, and Micah had been in the process of gathering and sorting the evidence that she had and needed to then take that all to an attorney to support her claims against JP as to his character, his shady behavior, and everything that he had done to hurt Micah, whether that was emotionally, psychologically, physically, and or financially. But Micah never got a chance to do anything with that, because while she was hospitalized, those documents, emails, and files, everything that she had gathered as evidence, they were all removed from her phone and personal laptop, not by her. The next month, in March, remember her body was found in April, so these are the events leading up to this, but in March, Micah called the police after finding that her tires had been slashed with a piece of metal. But not only that, because when she took her car to the dealership to get it fixed, she was also made aware that there had been a tracking device placed on her car. It was hidden. And actually, I believe in total there were 3 different instances in which Micah was made aware that tracking devices had been placed hidden in the car. Micah later then reported that she was trying to get a restraining order because, quote, she was afraid for her life. But perhaps the most unsettling thing comes directly from Micah's sister, because we later find out that Micah had confided in her and told her that yes, she was scared for her life, but not only that, because she told her sister that if something happened to her and she was found deceased, it wouldn't be her doing, it would be John Paul's. Micah's brother also came forward and said that she told him, quote, on numerous occasions that she feared John Paul and wanted to escape him. In April, just 12 months before her death, Micah legally filed for separation from JP. 9 days before her death, in an affidavit she sent to her lawyer, Micah stated, quote, since the day that we became husband and wife, I have been in every way that I can think of, emotionally, spiritually, financially, and physically, end quote. And on April 25th, just 2 days before her body would be found, Micah served JP divorce papers. That brings us to April 27th of 2024, the day of Micah's death. That day, at 11:38 a.m., Micah is seen on her Ring camera leaving her house. At 12:12 p.m., she goes into a pawn shop and she purchases that weapon. At 1:27 p.m., she stops at a gas station, gets gas, and buys a drink. And then at 2:54, 911 receives a phone call from Micah herself. In the call, she asks if her phone can be traced and her location can be found. She states that she is about to unalive herself and she wants to make sure that her family knows where to find her. She hangs up the phone before further information could be gathered from the operator, and she does not pick up the phone when the operator calls her back. By 3:21 p.m., officers had arrived at Lumber River State Park to begin looking for Micah because of her alarming 911 call. And then, as we know, at 4:23 p.m., the other witness called to report finding Micah's body floating in the water. And I'm not saying that this is what happened, but a lot of people believe that that strange 911 call that came from Micah, a lot of people believe that John Paul was standing right next to her, forcing her to make that call, because it does seem so random and so odd and so just crazy. On May 6th, the medical examiner released Micah's cause of death, ruled as a self-inflicted wound. Following Micah's death, so many people that either knew her or knew her and JP took to social media to discuss what their thoughts and beliefs were. A friend of Micah spoke out saying that she was 100% sure that Micah would not have made that decision to leave on her own, stating that Micah had plans for the future and saying that she was excited to start a new life, no longer living in fear of her husband, and was so glad that she was finally on her way out. Another friend of Micah's who talked to her the night before she was found stated, quote, I will not sit here and pretend that I know exactly what happened on Saturday, but I know a lot. I'm well aware in the past that Micah has had mental health issues and I've witnessed her struggle firsthand. The Micah I saw at the beginning of her mental health journey was not the Micah I witnessed in the last month. The Micah I was seeing was a grown woman trying to break the chain of a marriage. She was done. She hired a lawyer. She moved out. She was getting a divorce. I talked to her multiple times in her final week here on Earth. She was making plans to get her hair cut, helping with her car payment, and planning to meet us for the second service of church on Sunday. My final text with her on Friday at 9:19 p.m. was a woman making plans to live. What happened between Friday night and Saturday? This case is such a strange situation, and it has left a lot of people with the question of what part, if any, did her husband play in Micah's death? Back in November of 2024, the FBI searched John Paul's home in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. At the time, it wasn't exactly clear what they were looking for, but it became a little bit clearer in December When more than a year and a half after Micah's passing, a federal grand jury returned a 2-count indictment against 46-year-old John Paul Miller. Count 1, cyber stalking. Count 2, making false statements to federal investigators. The indictment alleged that beginning in November of 2022 and continuing up until Micah's death, so about approximately an 18-month period, Micah had been engaged in a repeated pattern of unwanted communication, stalking, interference to her finances and daily activities, damages to her car, GPS tracking devices placed on her car, amongst other things, all done by her husband. Prosecutors said the alleged cyber talking did leave Micah in a position in which she was scared of her own life. However, as far as I can tell, those charges to him did not at all alter or change the final ruling of her death. So it kind of sounds like they're saying, yes, he stalked her, he scared her, he did put her in a vulnerable position, but he is not the reason why she is no longer here. Whether you believe that or not is up for you to decide. JP's attorney issued a statement claiming his innocence, and it looks like, from what I could find, his trial is set to begin this October of 2026. He's facing a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison for cyber stalking and 2 years for his false statements. As of today, the Micah Miller case remains officially closed and her cause of death remains the same. And I want to end the video with a quote describing Micah by her family. Quote, Micah was energetic, affirming, adventurous, faithful, loving, giving, forgiving, talented, joyous, creative, assertive, bold, determined, authoritative, passionate, hardworking, a risk taker, and so much more. Micah loved her family so much. She looked forward to every text from her father or brother. She sought every opportunity to pour into her sisters. There were thousands of nights that she would pray out loud for God to just always bless and take care of her family. They were constantly on her mind. Micah wanted more than anything for each member of her family to serve Jesus continually. Yeah, terrible. That is all from me today. Let me know what your thoughts are on this case and if you've heard of this before and what your opinions are. But yeah. That's all from me. Thank you guys for spending time with me today and for listening to Micah's story. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
The footage of this man has always haunted me. He drops his bags, all of his belongings, his passport, and then sprints out of the airport. He then climbs a huge fence and runs away into a field. He is never seen ever again. This is the last ever confirmed footage of Lars Matank, a 28-year-old boy who went missing from Varna Airport in Bulgaria on the 8th of July 2014. He has been missing ever since. Over 12 years later, we still don't know what happened to him, and I think this is one of the most discussed true crime cases I have ever seen online. So let's talk about it. How did he get here and what are some of the theories? Lars Matank was born on the 9th of February 1986 in Berlin. He grew up in northern Germany and by all accounts he lived a pretty normal life. He had a good job, a great group of friends, and he also had a girlfriend. It seemed as though everything in his life was normal, even in his family life. He was very close with his mum, he was an only child, and he actually helped his father recover from a stroke. He was a massive football fan. He was a fan of SV Werder Bremen. He also was said to have really good outdoor skills like hunting, fishing, trapping. He had no known history of mental illness, which I think is very important and we will come back to later. On the 30th of June 2014, Lars and a group of his friends travelled to Varna, Bulgaria for a week at the Golden Sands Resort. This is in a kind of party stretch of the Black Sea coast. There's beaches, beach clubs, cheap drink. It's basically the perfect place to go for a first guy's holiday. Now, everything seemed fine at first, as it always does when we talk about these cases. However, I wanted to point out one thing his friends said later on, that he ate very little. Now, I just want to preface this by saying, I don't think that eating very little matters a lot to this case. That is because I have been on girls' holidays that revolve around drinking, and eating a lot is not kind of part of what you're doing. I'd highly doubt if this was a drinking holiday that all of the boys were eating proper meals. However, I just wanted to throw that in there that his friends did say that, and could that contribute to what happened? Possibly. Night of the 5th of July going into the 6th of July is where everything changes. The group are out drinking and the football is on. They are drinking, watching the football, and an argument breaks out with another group of German tourists over the football. Lars obviously supports Werder Bremen and Bayern Munich was playing. This was the team that the other group of tourists supported. The accounts on what actually happened differ. Some say that that was just an argument, some say there was a physical altercation, but the main point is that Lars separates from his friends and he doesn't return to the hotel that night. Then later on that night, either in the early morning or the next morning, Lars shows up back to his friends and he is injured. He tells them that he has been beaten by 4 men. Now, he says that they're possibly hired from the guys from the bar, the ones that he was arguing with. It is said that he had a painful jaw and a ruptured eardrum. He goes to a local doctor where he's diagnosed with an eardrum injury. He is prescribed the antibiotic cefprozil 500 milligrams. The doctor actually advised him against flying, saying that he should not fly home until he has finished the antibiotics. Lars's friends offer to stay with him until he's finished the antibiotics, then they can all fly home together. However, Lars insisted that they just go home as planned and he would join them in a couple of days when he was feeling better. I just wanted to point out as well, he has a really good set of friends. They're the type of friends that you would want, ones that offer to stay with you. On July the 7th, Lars's friends fly home as planned. Lars checks out of the resort that he was staying in and moves to a cheaper hotel called Hotel Colour. This is in an essentially rougher part of Varna in the city because it's high season, it's summer, and hotel rooms are very expensive and there's very little of them. He was probably just taking what he could get. This is where I can only describe an episode of paranoia kicks in. He essentially calls his mother whispering. He says that people are trying to kill him or rob him. He starts giving his mum some strange requests, like asking her to block his credit cards because he thinks they've been copied. Hotel CCTV would later show him pacing the halls, looking out the windows, ducking in an elevator, just looking not all there and as if he's worried about somebody coming for him or somebody watching him. Around 1 AM on the 8th of July, he leaves the hotel for about an hour and then he comes back. Literally nobody knows where he went during this hour. On the morning of the 8th of July, he phones his mother again. He says that the people who are chasing him are getting closer. She transfers him some money and helps him with travel arrangements. She essentially booked him onto a flight home. His plan was to get a taxi to the airport, see a doctor in the airport, get cleared for flying and then board his flight home, completely normal. He takes the taxi to the airport and inside the airport he goes to see Dr. Costa Kostov. The doctor examines him and says he's fit to fly. However, the doctor reported Lars as being nervous and restless and just a bit on edge. He was questioning the medication that he had been prescribed a couple of days earlier. It is at this point now that the case just completely flips. A construction worker goes into the doctor's office at the time of this check taking place. It's important to note that he was only there because the airport was under renovation at this time. It was at that moment the doctor reported that Lars suddenly changed. Something about that man or about that moment in time just flipped a switch. Lars suddenly stands up and yells something along the lines of, "I don't want to die here, I have to get out of here." He then drops everything, his luggage, his wallet, his mobile phone, his passport, everything, and just sprints, absolutely bombs it out of the airport. Airport security cameras capture the rest of this moment. He sprints through the terminal, out of the doors and across the parking lot. He reaches a high fence that's topped with barbed wire. He climbs it with surprising unhuman-like strength, drops into the field next door and runs away into the woods. That is the last ever confirmed sighting of Lars Matank. Nobody is ever seen chasing him on this footage. He simply just sprints and is gone. The police would later search the area with dogs, drones, everything, but there was nothing. There was no body, no belongings, and no clear trail as to where he went. His mum flew out to Bulgaria and hired a private investigator, and she kept searching. There have been a couple of unconfirmed sightings over the years of Lars. A possible hitchhiker near Varna over a year after he disappeared. There's been other reports across Europe and even one false alarm in Brazil. That turned out to be a different missing man, however none have actually been verified as being Lars. When it comes to the timeline and what we know about the case, this is where it ends. We have no further information and no further leads. As of 2026, the case remains open with both German and Bulgarian authorities still taking tips. There's a Facebook group dedicated to finding him with tens of thousands of members. His mum has never stopped looking. She said that she believes he could still be alive, possibly with memory loss. When it comes to theories in this case, as you can imagine, there is a lot. I'm going to read a couple I've noted down from my research that I've seen people discussing online, and then I'd like you to tell me your theories. What do you think happened to Lars? The first theory is a head injury or a concussion. Could this have been a brain injury, even a delayed brain injury? Could it have been a slow bleed in the brain that caused sudden paranoia and a fight or flight response days down the line? It's definitely possible. Then we have a psychotic break or an undiagnosed mental health issue. Stress, isolation, injury and fear may have triggered an episode of psychosis or panic. The family did say, as I said earlier, there's absolutely no history of any mental health issues when it comes to Lars. However, it has been said that episodes of psychosis and schizophrenia can actually appear in your late 20s, which is the age Lars was. Could this have been a rare side effect of the antibiotic that he was given? Cefprozil in rare circumstances has been linked to psychiatric side effects, including paranoia and hallucinations. However, when it comes to the theory of the antibiotics, some sources are very conflicting. Some sources say that he never even filed the prescription because he was paranoid about the ingredients. Some sources say he did take the antibiotics, so we honestly don't know. Another theory that's kind of linked to the antibiotics in the medication sense is that he could have potentially been taking other illicit substances that could cause psychiatric effects. Could it have actually been that he was in genuine danger? Some people online do believe that the bar fight or somebody else that he encountered when he was alone really were after him. That would explain the frantic calls to his mum, the whispering, pacing around the hotel, the hiding. That would make complete sense if somebody really was looking for him. People who are against this theory though also say, why would he run away from the safety of an airport and a flight home and run into the wilderness with absolutely no money or no ID? When I said earlier his mum booked him a plane, she also booked him a bus ticket in case he was unable to fly. She also sent him €500, which was never touched. Surely if he was running away from these people and he was going to hide out for a while, he would have needed that money. Other people argue that perhaps this was a voluntary disappearance. This theory basically says, what if he staged a dramatic exit to start a new life? This is widely considered because he left every form of identification behind. However, he had such a close, supportive relationship with his mother. He had a good job. He had good friends. There wasn't really a reason for him to want to run away and start over again. It has been 12 years though, and no matter what theory you believe, Lars Matank is still missing. The CCTV honestly gives me a lump in my throat. It's just a terrified young man sprinting through an airport. Honestly, I would just give anything to know what was going through his head or what he thought was happening, and then what happened after. If you or anyone you know was in that Varna area in July of 2014, or if you've ever seen someone who looks like Lars or matches his description, you can pass any information on to the German or Bulgarian authorities. His family are obviously still praying for answers. Even if he's no longer with us, I'm sure they would love to have him home to give him a proper burial. I would love to know, what do you guys think happened to Lars? Please comment down below and let me know what you think. I honestly am leaning towards either a psychotic break or maybe he really was in danger. That is the only thing I can think of. However, him running out the safety of an airport when he's in danger, I don't get it. Thank you all so much for being here and watching. If you do have any other case suggestions, please leave them down below. Look after yourself and I will see you in the next one.
This is the story of Sheldon Timothy Harrington Jr. Growing up in Grenada, Mississippi, Timothy comes from a close, very religious family. His grandfather founded the prominent apostolic church Abundant Life Assembly, and his father was the assistant pastor there. When he was just 8 years old, he began working at his family's property management business, which controlled over 50 rental properties across Grenada. He spent his childhood learning trade labor, conducting complex maintenance and property renovations. In high school, they called him Timmy, and he was known to be soft-spoken, quiet, just an all-around good kid. He sang in the school choir. He even played guitar at his family's church. In 2018, he moved to Oxford, Mississippi to attend University of Mississippi, aka Ole Miss, to pursue a degree in finance. Now, while he's pursuing his degree, he's taken what he's learned as a child and started his own moving company. He purchased a box truck and he started doing residential and commercial moves. He was a very established young man who liked to keep his personal life private. With his hometown Grenada being only about an hour away, he would frequently go back to attend some of the family church services, and he would sometimes bring a young lady for his family to meet. But back in Oxford, he was spending his time with a young man named Jimmy J. Lee. Jimmy was born in Jackson, Mississippi, and he also comes from a very religious background, with his father also being the pastor of a church. Jimmy is also a junior, being named after his father, just like Timothy. He was described as being a social butterfly, very energetic. While attending Forest Hill High School, he had developed a passion for helping other people and expressed his desire to study social work. In 2018, he enrolled in University of Mississippi, pursuing his bachelor's degree in public policy. He worked for CPS, organizing supply drives for baby formula and toddler hygiene products. Jimmy was unapologetic about his identity. He was a proud, openly gay man. He had become one of the leaders for the Oxford LGBT community, and he would occasionally do drag shows. Ole Miss is where they met, and while Jimmy was out and proud, Timothy was not. His lifestyle could not get back to his family nor his friends, so Jimmy had to remain a secret. The two graduated in May of 2022, and through digital footprint evidence, that's when the two began to be intimate. Jimmy lived at Campus Walk Apartments, and after graduation, he had got accepted to a graduate's program for Masters of Social Work. And Timothy lived very close, but off campus. The two would converse mainly through Snapchat. On July 8th, 2022, Jimmy texts Timothy asking was he in Oxford. And when Timothy finally texts back, Jimmy threw on his robe and his slippers and he drove around the corner to Timothy's apartment. Now, he wasn't even there a full hour, because at around 4:40 a.m., Jimmy was pulling back up to his apartment. The two argued. Now, it's unclear what they argued about, but it caused Jimmy to storm out. Now, Jimmy is walking back up to his apartment. Timothy is trying to text him, but he's realizing that Jimmy done blocked his ass. So he done logged into another Snapchat account and messaged him from that and asking him to come back. And Jimmy is like, I feel like you're luring me back over there to beat me up or something. And Timothy is like, no, just come back. I'll do that thing that you've been wanting me to do. Jimmy said, I'm coming. Now that was around 5:55 a.m. Timothy immediately Googled, how long does it take to strangle someone, after Jimmy had gave him the okay that he was coming back. But not even 10 minutes after that last text message, Jimmy was pulling back up to Timothy's apartment, and Timothy texts him saying, the door is open. As soon as Jimmy entered the apartment, Timothy attacks him, knocking him unconscious and choking him to death. He then went to Walmart. Now, this is all on surveillance camera. He was at Walmart at around 6:50 a.m. So it took him no time to do what he did. On a surveillance camera at Walmart, you can see that he was looking at large trash bins, and then he went and bought duct tape. He made it back to his apartment, took Jimmy's keys, moved his car, and dumped it at an apartment complex called Molly Bar Trails. He then jogged away from the car. Now, this is all caught on surveillance camera, and made it to the main road where he seen somebody that he knew from school and flagged them down. That person gave him a ride back to his apartment. It is now around 9:30 a.m. Timothy got Jimmy inside of the car somehow, and he drove down to his hometown, Grenada, where his business truck is at his parents' house. He pulled up to get his business truck. He loaded a wheelbarrow and shovels. This was all caught on Ring camera. He then purposely left his phone at his parents' house while he goes and dumps Jimmy's body. Now, that same Ring camera caught him coming back and unloading the truck at around 11:30 a.m. He then cleaned himself up by late that afternoon and headed back to Oxford. Meanwhile, back at campus, Jimmy's friends are worried because they have been calling and texting him all day and ain't getting no answer. They were supposed to take a trip to Jackson, Mississippi, because today was Jimmy's mother's birthday. They even went to Timothy's apartment later that evening because, of course, you're going to know who your friend is messing with. And Timothy flat out lied to them and said, I have not seen him. He left my apartment yesterday and I have not seen him since. Around 8:30 p.m., Jimmy's mother had reported him missing. Now, this caused an uproar because the LGBT community is thinking hate crime. They immediately started social media campaigns, volunteer search parties. 3 days into the investigation, Jimmy's car was found in that apartment complex, and the police decided to pull the surveillance footage from the complex. A week into the investigation, cell phone data was brought to light. 10 days into the investigation, those Snapchat messages was brought to the light. And by week 2, they had all the information they need to go question Timothy. Now, when they initially questioned him, he acted like he didn't even know Jimmy like that. But he said something that made the detectives raise their eyebrow. Timothy said he probably was going to meet somebody to have sex, and they kidnapped him. And the police were like, oh, that was personal. Come on down here to the station so we can talk to you some more. After showing Timothy that they seen the messages between him and Jimmy, he had no choice but to finally tell them that they were having a sexual relationship. But he said he did not do anything to Jimmy, but they had enough evidence to arrest him. He was arrested on July 22nd, 2022, and by December 1st, he was out. They still had no body, so they decided he can go ahead and bond out $250K, and you just gotta wear your ankle monitor. 2 whole years passed, still no Jimmy. So the judge went on ahead and declared him deceased, and finally are going on with the trial. And the trial started in December of 2024. The jury deadlocks 11-1, forcing the judge to declare a mistrial. This fool is going back home. But not so fast, bitch, because on February 1st, 2025, some deer hunters came across some skeletal remains, and around the remains' neck was a gold necklace with the name J. Lee on it. The same necklace that's in this picture. Jimmy's body was found 15 minutes from Timothy's parents' house. So back to fucking jail you go. And mind y'all, his family members, church members, friends, they were all rallying behind him hard. Like he would never do something like this. Baby, his trial started December 1st, 2025 at 9 a.m. to be exact. And when they were doing the jury selection, he abruptly stopped and said, I'm guilty. I'ma plead guilty, because he knew he was going away for life. He pled guilty to second-degree murder and tampering with evidence. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison. And all I have to say is, you did all this so your very religious family wouldn't find out about your sexuality. And you think you look straight. All this time you thought you looked straight? That's what blew me. You think people actually thought you were straight.